Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome to So Lounge. Today is Sewing It All Together, Part 3, Finishing Your Hem. Now, if you're just joining us, I am working with Butterick 4498, which is an out-of-print pattern from the 90s. But if you want to follow along and make a similar dress, there is a fast and easy A-line dress from Butterick. It's 6653, and that's available in the stores right now if you want to go out and pick it up. My dress is completely finished, so I have put it all together. The zipper's in, the bias tape is in, finishing out the neckline and the armholes. And the very last step of any project is going to be putting in the hem. Now, my hem, as you may recall from the zipper video, was a little uneven at the bottom. One side was a little bit longer, possibly because the fabric slipped a little when I was cutting it. So I have trimmed out the bottom to even it out on both sides. I can do that with this type of dress because it's so loose, and when I tried it on, it is just kind of hanging. It's not fitted. I can trim it out and it'll be fine. If you do have a more fitted garment, then you would want to put it on and measure the hem around before you do any kind of trimming, just depending on your curves. The back hem may be a little bit shorter, so you might need to adjust accordingly. The pattern instructions have some tips on finishing the hem, so let's go in for a closer look. Looking at the pattern instructions, the last column on the back is for finishing. So the first thing you have is to sew in a hook and eye, which we're just going to skip over for now because it's not very exciting. But going down, you can see that the next instruction is about the hem. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so it says to turn up the hem, base close to fold, trim the hem to an even width, finish the raw edge, and then sew the hem in place, easing in any fullness if necessary, and press. And then you've got this very cryptic looking little diagram where you have to figure out what that means. So as we know from our pattern piece, which is back over here, the hem is going to be 2 inches. And that is going to be how much we have to turn it under. So that's the first step. So the first turn up hem, we're going to turn it up 2 inches to go along with the pattern. So I have my dress and I have my tape measure because that's going to be the easiest thing to use. If you don't have a tape measure handy, grab your hem gauge. Mine's over there on the table, and I'm going to use this because it's going to be easier. So the best way to do this is to flip your dress or your garment to the wrong side out, and then you're going to go around the garment. Now, I usually start on one of the seam lines just because it's going to be easier to measure, and I will start from there, and I'm going to just measure the straight 2 inches, which is what the pattern instruction is for. So we're just going to turn it under and pin it, and like I said, I start on the seam, so I'm going to start on the center back seam, and then I'm just going to pin it. Let's go in for a closer look. This is just going around the hem, and we're just going to measure 2 inches. I started at the center back. That's going to be a little less than 2 inches. Let's fix that a little bit. I think that should be right. Let's see. 2 inches, yes. So we're just measuring to this 2 inch mark, and then we're just going to go around. I think it's easier to fold it up at the seams and then go back around. So that's what I'm going to do. And then we will even it out. So just not quite 2 inches yet. Too much. So it's a process. Just work on it. And one thing I forgot to mention is that once you finish your dress, this is kind of your last chance to figure out if the length is correct for you or not, if you decided not to add any additional length to the bottom of it. So try on your dress, see how the length is, and then decide if you want to go with the hem length that the pattern suggests, or if maybe for you personally, it would be better to go with slightly shorter. I tried on this dress 2 inches without any hem at all. It hits me right below the knee, which is very unattractive. But once I add in the 2-inch hem, I folded it under, it hits just above the knee. So it's perfect length for a sporty summer dress. And that's why I am doing this at 2 inches all the way around. So I've got my seams pinned up, and I'm just gonna go back around and continue to pin. And so you just do the same, and then we will meet at the sewing machine to do some basting. I'm back at the machine, and the instructions for the pattern said to baste close to the fold. So the fold we're talking about is the bottom edge of the dress where we just folded it over at 2 inches. And if you don't know, basting is the longest stitch on your sewing machine. So on my Bernina, that's a 5 length, but on my brother, it's a 4. So just check the length on your sewing machine and put it to whatever the longest one is, and that's going to give you a basting stitch. Now, a basting stitch is just really to hold this in place, and it's not going to be a permanent stitch. So once we finish with the hem, we're going to pull it out. So don't worry if it's not perfectly straight, that's totally fine. It's really just there to hold the hem in place while we finish with the additional steps. So let's go in for a closer look. So here we are, this is a close-up. This is the center back seam. This is where I'm going to start. And since we're basting close to the fold, I'm just gonna line up the bottom folded edge with the edge of the presser foot and lower it down. And this is just basic and easy, so we're just gonna run that stitch around until we get to the other side. And just keep it lined up as you go around, more or less. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see that it's kind of moved a little bit as I'm sewing. You can also see that this part here, it seems to kind of be puckering a little bit. That's fine, just smooth it out as best as you can for the gathering. For the basting part, it's not gathering, but we may have to do a little bit of easing, which is kind of like gathering at some point in the hemming process. So just keep going around, and we will be done soon. And now we're back to the side seam. I think that's the last one now. And we are back to the center back seam. Don't stitch over the other line, but kind of, you know, we've probably got the width of the presser foot between the 2 stitch lines. I'm just gonna raise my needle, lift up that presser foot, and then I'm gonna pull these threads out long. So they're both going to be long. And then that's our basting stitch that we've got in there just to hold everything in place. So I've got my basting stitch all finished all the way around, and at this point we're gonna take out all the pins. I had one last one there. And the last step before we start doing anything else is to put it back on my dress form, or if you don't have a dress form, go put it on, have somebody check the hem for you, or stand in a mirror so you can just kind of look to see if there's any problems. And you wanna make sure that it's straight before you do anything else, any more cutting or anything. Sometimes if it's not completely even, or if it's a little bit longer on one side, you can just pull out that basting stitch and adjust it with some pins, and then just go from there. So if you look at it, it's even all the way around. Yay, it worked. And now I am going to figure out how I'm gonna finish the bottom of the hem, but we're gonna have to go in for a closer look. So I went around and measured with my hem gauge to see if any of this was a little bit shorter anywhere so that we could trim out the seam. And it is about 3 7/8 or sorry, 1 7/8. So it's an 1/8 of an inch difference. And so what I'm going to do is I adjusted my hem gauge, so it is 7/8, so it's that 1/8 right before the 2 line. And I'm going to go around, and I moved it again. Nope, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go around and mark on my fabric where I need to trim it. And this is a heat erasable pen for fabric. So I'm using this. It's going to fade once I iron the hem in, but I'm going to trim it off, so it doesn't really matter. I'll put a link for these in my description. But we're going to just go around the hem, and anywhere it's a little bit longer, we're just going to put a little mark so that then when I cut, I know that I'm cutting. See, it's exactly there. It's going to be cut it at the right length, so then everything will be even all the way around. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so I've got my line drawn in, and you can see that at some parts I don't have a line. That's because that's the correct length. But where there is a line, then I'm going to go back in with my dressmaker shears and very carefully follow that line around, making sure not to cut the fabric underneath because that would be a disaster, or any of the seams as we are going across. So we're just evening out this line here. I'm going to even it out over there so you can see, and then there's a little bit more here where I need to even it out a teensy bit. And just a little bit more over here at this side seam as well. So just continue around however, wherever your marks are, and then just trim off that little extra above your marks. And then miss that spot. So the next step will be to go over to the iron, and we're going to turn under that edge to finish it, and then we're going to press it. So we're back at the iron, and this is when a Dritz Easy Hem really comes in handy for hemming, because that's what it's actually for. And if you haven't gotten one of these, I will drop the link in the description below this video. And what we're going to do is we're going to press it under 1/4 of an inch and then go around the whole hem and to finish it, and then we will pin it, and then we will go sew it in with the machine. So let's go in for a closer look. So we're at the iron, and I have my iron set on cotton, and I have the steam function on. And this is the hem that we have turned under. So you can see this is our basting stitch line. This is the hem, we've trimmed it, and we have the front of the dress hanging over the front of the ironing board. Now, next step is going to be, we're going to put in a 1/2 inch hem using our Dritz Easy Hem. And to do that, we're going to fold this down, and then we're going to fold that edge up. So we're going to fold it up. We're folding the hem down, basting stitches down here. We're going to put the Dritz Easy Hem over that, and then we're going to fold the very bottom edge up 1/2 inch. And then we're going to go around the whole garment like this. And my iron has turned off again. Okay. We're going to go around the iron, or use the iron to go around the dress to hem in or press in at the 1/2 inch mark. And we're going to do this all around the garment. So let it cool. Watch out because the Dritz Easy Hem gets hot. If you do not have a Dritz Easy Hem, you can use your hem gauge and just measure 1/2 inch. And just, if you're marking it, don't use those marking pins because they are heat fading. So if you use them, then they will disappear once you start ironing. But we are using the Dritz Easy Hem, which makes it easier, hence the name. So just go around your garment. So we're back at the machine now that we have pressed in that fold that we used to finish the edge of the hem, the top edge of the hem. And the next step is going to be to stitch a line, but we are not sewing in I guess it's permanent, but it's not permanent in that it's going to be attached to anything. So we're putting in another stitch line that is going to be a larger line, probably just a little bit less than a basting stitch length, because we want to be able to gather and ease in the extra fabric from the A-line. So if you think about it this way, when the A-line comes out, it kind of flares a little bit. And once you turn that under, then you're going to have this extra little bit of fabric on the side seams. So we're putting in an extra stitch line so that we can pull those threads to curve in those little points from the A-line so that the hem lies flat all the way around. Because if not, it's going to be kind of bunchy at each of the side seams where the point comes down for the A-line. If you think about it in terms of a straight skirt comes down straight, and so then when you fold it under, the fabric all matches up because it's all on the same line. But the A-line darts out, so because of that, we have to accommodate that extra fabric, which is called easing in the extra fabric. And you would also, another time you'd use ease, or you'd ease something in, you'd use it in the hem with an A-line, but then you'd also use it in putting in a sleeve. You want to ease in that extra fabric into the seam line. And you do it by gathering. So that's what we're getting ready to do. Let's go in for a closer look. So we're here for a close-up, and we are going to start at the center back seam. And we are just going to be stitching a line through this part. And I have my machine set on about 4.5, almost to 5. We could actually just put it up to 5 so it's at a basting stitch. It's not really going to matter. We just definitely want it on a looser stitch than what we normally sew at. But something like in the 4 or 5 range is going to be preferable. So I'm just got everything lined up. I'm just lining up this outside edge with the edge of the presser foot because that's going to be a little bit easier to follow. And then we're just going to stitch around. Once we get to the end, we're not going to go over the other stitch line, so just stop once you get to it. Raise up your needle, and we're going to raise up that presser foot, and we're going to snip off these threads. Now you can see that it is a basting stitch, and we're going to go back to the table, and I'm going to show you how to pull that to ease in the extra fullness from the A-line hem. So we have our hem, it's all folded up. This is the line we just basted. And now we're going to go through and get it to lie down flat, because you can see that it's kind of puckered down here because it's bigger. There's just more fabric than because of the A-line. So we're going to take a straight pin and we're going to pull this thread that we just stitched, this thread line, and we're just going to gently pull it so that it gathers a little bit, and we're going to work around the hem to get it to lie flat. You can see how it's lying flatter there. And this is a technique that my grandmother literally taught me yesterday because I was struggling with getting this to fit because no one has ever told me this. So, you can see how it's lying flatter, and you just go around and you pull out these pins. Here, I'll pull it up a little so it's easier to see. You just go in, you pull out some of these little threads, and you're just basically going to be gathering it a little bit to get it to all fit and lie flat, because you've got that extra fabric at the corners because of the A-line points. So just continue around the garment in this manner. So this is kind of a close-up, and you can see how there's like a little tiny bit of a gather, but you can see how it's lying flat, even though this is a little bit wavy, because that's what we're pulling in to gather. Just a little bit so that then the seam lies flat and it's not puckering at any one point. So that's what the goal of what we're doing with picking these little threads are, is to get it to do this, to lie like that. Now that you have the side seam ease adjusted, because that's where the extra fullness was, I put a couple of pins into the side seam just to hold it gathered the way that we had adjusted it so it doesn't slip out. And now we're going back in to put in the very, very final hem. And to do that, we are going to move the presser foot against the top edge of the hem. That's going to be closest to the basting line we just sewed in. And then I'm going to move my needle over to the far left so that I'm sewing very, very close to that turned under edge. let's go in for a closer look. So this is a close-up of what I was talking about. There's a bunch of loose threads around. Okay, so I'm starting at the center back seam. I am lining up the left edge of the presser foot with the top of the hem, and I'm going to lower that down. And then the other thing I've done is I've moved my needle over to the far left, and that's going to sew a smaller seam closer to the top of this hem. So it's going to be about 1/8 of an inch. And then I have my length set to my usual 2.5. So I'm just going to start sewing, and I'm going to sew all the way around my garment. Now I'm coming back around to the center back seam, and I am just going to finish it out. And I'm just going to stitch over the beginning of the stitch line instead of doing a back stitch. And then I'm finished. So we're going to lift that up, cut off these threads, and you can see that we have a finished hem. And that's it. So we have finished sewing it all together, parts 1, 2, and 3, finishing out with the hem. And as you can see, my hem is finished. Honey says hi. And I'm going to turn this around so you can see it, minus the dog. And after I put in the actual finished hem, I went back and pulled out that basting stitch. Then I pressed the whole hem and went back and just gave the whole dress a press. And now it is ready to go. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to click like below and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. And if you've got questions but no one to answer them, head on over to Let's Talk Sewing for Beginners, hosted by Sew Lounge. It's an interactive Facebook group where you can ask all the questions you want, and I will do my very best to get you some answers. I go live in the group on Wednesdays, so check the events tab for the schedule. Until we meet again, happy sewing!